fellow cinephiles, Film Guru here. So I'm continuing on my director retrospective with P.T Anderson films, and today I'm looking at his second film, Boogie Nights. And this stars Mark Walberg, Julianne Moore, Burt Reynolds, William H. Macy, Don Cheadle, Heather Graham, John C. Reilly and Philip Seymour Hoffman. Ultimately, this film is really a look at the adult film industry in the 1970s in the San Fernando Valley. And it looks at the rise and fall of Dirk Diggler, played by Mark Walberg. He's our eyes through the world. And it really is a classic backstage tale told through his eyes. And it looks at the family of filmmakers he becomes part of. And it looks at how they're trying to elevate the porn film into artistic heights. It's a very exhilarating and moving and quite funny film. And this is quite an achievement for a young director to come from doing a small independent sort of crime thriller noir film, Hard 8, to doing this, a big massive film looking at the adult industry with a huge ensemble cast of known actors and up and comers. And it is just astonishing to me of what he was able to accomplish, to go from a small film to a huge film like this. And then this showed later on he would go bigger and bigger and make interesting and unique films along his career. There's something really fascinating about this film. It's the way the camera's used. The camera becomes part of the world. It feels like it's shot like Scorsese's Goodfellas. And there's an opening sequence where we follow Burt Reynolds' character, Jack Horn, and Julianne Moore's character, Amber Waves, through this sort of, follow them in through the club into this sort of booth area where they sit down. And we get to see the whole world that way. The camera pans around, we get to see a variety of characters. And a lot of the characters that inhabit the film are in this particular club scene at the start. And it just feels, there's a flowingness to it. There's this using the camera to tell the story. It's showing the world of these particular characters. We're introduced to a variety of characters in this start beginning. Besides those two, we meet Dirk Diggler's, Mark Wahlberg's character, and we find out who he is, and we find the guy who runs the club. We meet John C. Reilly's character, who's ultimately part of that world as well, and we meet Heather Graham's character, Roller Girl. And this is a great setup. This is a great way of introducing all the characters in a short period of time so we sort of know what's happening. And then when the characters leave this particular bar, we get to see them in their own environment. We follow Mark Walberg into his house, he goes into his room, we have this great panning shot around showing all the things on the wall and sort of describing the character and showing the character like Scorsese would do or Hitchcock used to do, especially with films like Rear Window. And we get a sense of who this person is just through that. We get to see their home life and what it's like. Then we also see Jack Horner and Amber Waves' sort of life where they go into their house and we get to see what it looks like, and the camera pans around like it did with Dirk Diggler's little room, and we get to see the type of people they are and the world that they live in. And it does that with a variety of characters, which I think is brilliant. It's a great way of introducing the characters without saying too much about them or without giving away too much. What makes this film really interesting is it feels like a family. It feels like a sort of family brought together through circumstances. They're all involved in the same sort of occupation, making adult films within the 1970s. There's filmmakers there, Jack Horner's the director, you've got actors, you've got a variety of things there showing how this sort of world works. And it really is authentic to the 70s in a lot of ways. There's a lot of humour in it. P.T Anderson did a short film based on this character, and he took the humour out of that and made this film, and what an achievement. I think it's brilliant. All the acting is fantastic and solid, and there's some performances that really stand out here. Julianne Moore's really great in this, playing Amber Waves, a character that's trying to get her son back. She works in part of the industry, she's a porn star, and she's sort of trying to make ends meet, but she really wants to see her son and him to be part of her life. But because of the industry she's in, they feel it's not safe for a child, that she can't really see her son, and sort of her sort of struggling to come to terms with that. And she's so great, and she becomes sort of like a mother figure to all the other characters, especially Dirk Diggler's character and Heather Graham's character, Roller Girl. There's such a sweetness to her, and she's such an interesting character. And she's a character you can really sort of get behind. I think that John C. Reilly is good. John C. Reilly does what John C. Reilly does. He's sort of humorous. Don Cheadle's really good. This is one of his early performances. He plays Buck, another porn star who's trying to go straight ultimately. He's trying to start his own business, but because of who he is and the industry he's involved in, No banks really want to give him money, and he really struggles through that. P.T Anderson also put a lot of cast that he used before, such as Philip Seymour Hoffman, Philip Baker Hall, John C. Reilly. But to me, some of the real standouts here is Philip Seymour Hoffman. He plays this Scotty, this sweet sort of guy that he's ultimately in love with Dirk Diggler, but he can't express that, and you feel really sorry for him, but he's so sort of beautifully sad. And Philip Seymour Hoffman shines here, and what a great character for him to play. It was very different to the earlier characters he did play, and very different from the small cameo role that he had within Hard Eight. He really shines here, and you really feel for him. He's ultimately a lovable loser in this, and it's a theme that P.T Anderson used in a variety of his movies, especially his early ones. And he's just fantastic to watch, and I think gives a really brilliant performance. But the true standouts here, who were two actors who were Oscar nominated for performances here, is Burt Reynolds and Mark Walberg. Reynolds hadn't had a real hit in quite a while and hadn't been a really good film in a long time, and this role came around. He didn't quite agree with it. He didn't see eye to eye with P.T Anderson in a lot of ways because he didn't agree with the character and the industry was involved in, even though he gave such a brilliant performance and was nominated for his performance in this film. He's so great to watch. He plays Jack Horner, he's the director, but he's also like the father figure of all the young cast in this film. And he holds everything together, and he's a real strong rock within this movie for all the characters and the story. And he's brilliant to watch. And like I said, the other standout is Mark Walberg. Wow, I've never seen him play a character like this before or after this role. He's so great in this. It was him trying to make his way. He'd done a handful of films such as Basketball Diaries and a few other films, and hadn't really been thrust into the limelight and hadn't really made his mark as an actor until this film. He's so sweet and innocent and nice in this, and his slow descent into aggressiveness and drug taking and the violent sort of behaviour that he shows towards the end of the film, he's just so brilliant to watch. You really feel for him, you really believe he's this 17-year-old kid trying to make his own way in the world. And he's so desperate to find a family and to find a place he fits in. And Jack Horner provides that with this group of people who come together to make this sort of films. And he just shines so brilliantly in it. So impressed with him. And I haven't seen him play such a dramatic role like this since this film, I don't think. I've seen him play action characters, I've seen him play a variety of things. The Yards is probably another example of a good dramatic piece, but this is a real shining moment for him. And what performances that P.T Anderson can get out of these two actors is phenomenal. It just goes to show what a great filmmaker, writer, and ability to work with great actors this man is. There's a theme I started to notice as I've gone through his movies, especially with Hard Eight and this. P.T Anderson sort of gives a happy ending. It's not a conventional happy ending, but it's a happy ending nonetheless. Like in Hard Eight, he gave this ending of these two, John C. Reilly and Gwyneth Paltrow's characters coming together and being protected by Philip Baker Hall's character. And it's sort of this sort of nice and happy ending in a way. And Boogie Nights is very similar. It starts off in the world, we see the rise of Dirk Diggler and other stars, and then we see his slow descent. But then it has sort of a happy ending where he comes back to it in a different way and a different mindset. And it's sort of each character gets their moment to have happiness. Don Cheadle's character, like I said earlier, is trying to start his own hi-fi business, and none of the banks want to give him money because they say he's part of the pornography world and industry and they won't help him out. And there's a fortuitous moment where he's ultimately a witness to a crime, a robbery, and he ends up taking the money and using that to start his own business, which I guess is a bit iffy legally, I guess. But the point is that out of desperation, he found his way to make what he wanted to make of himself and to sort of make his mark in the world. And I think that's really great. And all the other characters sort of get their happy endings too in a way. And I really like that. This might sound strange, but I feel there's a real fairy tale element to this film. It's like a magical world. It's kind of interesting. Then it slowly gets a bit dark and a bit twisted in parts. And then it sort of has its happy ending. And I think this film really encapsulates that, really encapsulates the 70s. It really takes a real hard and interesting look at the adult film industry in that particular period. I like the costumes in it, I like the music, the camera work is absolutely fantastic. Like I said, we open up and the camera's used to tell the story of who these characters are. And then when Dirk Diggler becomes very famous and rich and has his own house, then the camera's used in a similar way, where we pan around and we see the environment he's created and how different that is from when we first meet him in the film. And then there's moments where there's four people talking in a booth. The camera will focus on two of them and then it'll slowly pan to one of them as if that's our focus. That's the character P.T. Anderson wants us to look at and watch. And he does the same thing on the other character on the other side. And it sort of really shows you, this is what I want you to look at. And I think that's great. The camera work there's so much movement, it's flowing, it's constantly moving in a variety of different ways. There's a lot of tracking shots, there's a lot of pan shots, and it's just brilliantly used and made. The sequences that really stand out for me are when we're first, Dirk Diggler, Eddie, his original name was Eddie before he changed to Dirk Diggler, when Jack Horner takes him into the house, into this party, and we're introduced to the whole family and the variety of players that are going to take place in this film. And we go through the house, out the back to the pool, and we meet some interesting characters. And we're sort of immersed in this sort of world, and that's our eyes into the world to begin with. And then P.T. Anderson has another shot like that at the end of the film, where all this stuff has happened, and then we follow Burt Reynolds through the house and we see the real family element. Julianne Moore's like the mother character. You've got Heather Graham's character Roller Girl, which is like their daughter. Dirk Diggler's like their son, and an extended family with all the filmmakers that go into it within that industry is part of their world and part of their family. Use of the camera here is absolutely brilliant. And like I said before, the whole film feels like Goodfellas. The way it's shot, the way it's told through a particular point of view, the world that we are shown, and the quick cuts and pans and zooms that are used within it are very reminiscent of Scorsese's Goodfellas. Not that it's the same movie, but it's just the way it's sort of made is similar. Maybe he was inspired by that film, I'm not sure, but that's sort of what it feels like to me. It also looks at how the industry changed and how we went from film to VHS, and that's what this film looks at too. We first begin in the 70s and it's about these films being shot on film, put into cinemas, and people seeing them that way. And then as the film goes on, it goes into where film's just too expensive, so they go into the VHS market and ultimately making these films on video and getting them to the video stores and other adult shops, I guess, for people to see them, to see a wider market. And that's kind of an interesting evolution for the way these films were made. And I thought this element was really interesting. Jack Horner's character is very reluctant to get involved in this. He doesn't want to change the way he's doing things, but he ends up having to because that's just the way that things are going. Each character aspires to something in this film too, which I thought was interesting. Jack Horner aspires to elevate and this is sort of what this character wants. He wants to leave his mark and have something that's different and elevate these particular films to something more than just what they're designed for. The Dirk Diggler character, he really wants to be, known and famous. He wants to prove himself. He wants to make it in his world on his own 2 feet. And he wants to prove to his parents that he is somebody, he is something. And that's his driving force. Roller Girl, Heather Graham's character, she's a character that sort of aspires to be better and aspires to, ultimately she wants to finish high school, but she struggles with that, and it's sort of how she dreams of becoming better than she is and to sort of evolve out of the environment that she finds herself in. Like I said, Don Cheadle's character Buck, he's the same thing. He wants to open his own business and move away from the industry. Julianne Moore's character, Amber Waves, wants to become a filmmaker herself and starts doing documentaries and ads and stuff for particular people, and really starting to pave a way that way while trying to go legit so she can ultimately get her son back or get to see her son. So the film is filled with a lot of characters like that who aspire to something beyond what they've got right here. And I really like that. And I think that's a great testament to P.T Anderson to be able to create really interesting characters, really believable and realistic characters within this sort of world that not a lot of people know about. And I think he's really great in that. It's a simple story, but the aesthetic of it, the look of it, the feel. It's one of the best films about the 70s made today. And I really like that. And like I said, this was such an achievement for a director as his second film. There's two types of directors usually. There's a director that starts really big and can't really get any bigger than his first film or their first film. And so they make good films along the way, but nothing to the height of that particular film. A good example of that is Orson Welles with Citizen Kane. He made such a big film to begin with, he had nowhere to go. Then there's the other filmmakers who really start in a simple, small idea and get bigger. Tarantino's the example of that. And P.T Anderson is a great example of how that sort of works. And he made bigger films, and he started small and got bigger and bigger, and now he makes such great and epic films that are really professional and realistic and an interesting decade and era. And this was the first of him choosing a different era to make a film within. There's something really wonderful about this movie, and you get sucked into the world and the characters, and I think P.T Anderson did a fantastic job with this. And he's a director who's really proving himself and has proved himself through the years and the decades that he's made films. Anyway, that's all from me today. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please hit subscribe in the bottom. Follow me on Facebook and Twitter. Otherwise, until next time, enjoy the movies.